Hi guys, I'm Mrs. Roth, and today we're going to be making some easy sugar cookies. I wanted to start doing these baking videos since we are having to learn from home, and my fourth grade teacher used to bake with us every Friday. And those memories are some of the most special memories I have, and I still use some of those recipes today that she used back when we were in fourth grade. So I've got some of our materials together and we're going to go through what you need to get ready. First of all, you're going to need some basic supplies, but if you have long hair like I do, let's make sure that we put that up. I just put mine up in a basic little bun because nobody wants hair in their cookies. Okay. Another thing is make sure that you have washed your hands really well, okay, before you get started. I'm going to wear gloves today. I love wearing gloves, especially when I'm cooking and baking. And long before anything ever happened with coronavirus and everything like that, my husband and I always had a big stash of gloves to wear when we're cooking and when we're baking. Okay. All right, so for our ingredients today, I used a recipe for easy sugar cookies that I got from allrecipes.com. To start with, we're going to need some flour, and I keep my flour here in the canister. Okay, just some basic all-purpose flour. I also have, and you can use gluten-free flour if you have family members or other people that would need this recipe to be gluten-free. This Pillsbury Best I found works pretty well with most recipes. Next, you're going to also need baking soda and baking powder. Now, these are two different ingredients, and sometimes people get them confused. Baking soda is usually in a rectangular prism, and baking soda is usually in a canister or a cylinder. Okay, but this recipe is going to call for both. So we'll just be careful not to get those mixed up. Okay, next you're going to need to have some butter or some margarine. For this recipe, you can use either. And I have it, it needs to already be very soft, okay? So if your butter is still in the refrigerator, you may wanna go ahead, get the butter out of the refrigerator, let it come up to room temperature. Most of the reviews for this recipe said the softer your butter is, the better your cookies are gonna be. So try not to be impatient. If you really want to make it now and your butter is hard, you can put it, usually most microwaves have like a soften or a defrost, so you can try it just a little bit at a time and rotate your butter around, and you can probably soften your butter up a little bit. Just make sure it's not like super hard out of the refrigerator. It's going to be very hard to mix up. Okay, so you need your butter or your margarine. We're also going to need sugar. So I've got just regular plain sugar here in my canister, and you will need 1 egg, and the last ingredient is vanilla. So if you don't have vanilla, you can probably still make your cookies and they will turn out and like look fine, and they have plenty of sugar in them, so they'll probably taste fine, but vanilla just adds that special yummy flavor, that's that classic sugar cookie flavor. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. I had sent the regular recipe out, but we are going to use a crazy mixed up fraction recipe today. Take a look at this. All right, guys, before we fix that recipe, I want to just go over some of the basic materials that you will need to make this. Okay, first of all, you're gonna need a couple bowls. One, just a regular size mixing bowl. This happens to be my favorite one for making cookies. Then you'll need just a slightly smaller bowl that we're gonna use to mix together the flour and some of the other ingredients first. Okay, to measure your ingredients today, I have a really cute set of measuring spoons that my mother-in-law got for me. I love them because they have little purple tiger paws on them. And I'm going to use these. They have a 1 cup, they have a half cup, a third cup, a quarter cup, and those are nice. But if you don't have an actual set of measuring cups, that's fine too. I had many things in my cupboard that I could use for measuring. This is a little Pampered Chef bowl that has the markings for a quarter cup, a half cup, and a full cup on it. I have little Pyrex dishes in my cupboard that if you look on the bottom, it will tell you the smallest one is a cup. The next size up is 2 cups. So you can use these, something like this as well for measuring. A lot of people use a measuring cup that looks like this when they're baking. And this also has all of the little measurements on it, a third of a cup, a quarter cup, 2/3 a cup. So you can also use this, okay? So just because you don't have exactly the same supplies that I have, all your stuff will turn out just as great, okay? You're also going to need some sort of measuring spoons today. And again, that's going to have your tablespoon and your teaspoon. But if you don't have the exact ones, I'll show you how to just use a regular tablespoon or teaspoon. You will need something to do some mixing with. You can use a whisk. You can use, I like a wooden spoon. I'm also going to use an electric mixer at one point, but if you don't have an electric mixer, that's okay too. You're just going to have to beat it by hand, and I'm sure it'll turn out great. And of course, you are going to need an oven to bake your cookies in, and you're going to need a cookie sheet, okay, or something that you can bake your cookies on. You can see that mine is well loved. And I like parchment paper to put over it because it makes cleanup a lot easier. But again, not necessary, just some sort of sheet that you can put your cookies into the oven on. Okay then, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, boys and girls, we're going to need to do a little bit of math today with these fractions to try to get our recipe right. We've got to look at this improper flour. As you know, if you're being improper, that means that the top of the fraction is too big and it's much bigger than the bottom of the fraction, and that makes us feel very uncomfortable. So let's fix this fraction. This recipe says 11/4. Well, when I'm looking at my cups here, I don't know that I would want to put in 11 quarter cups of flour. Now, I could do that, and it will turn out fine, but let's fix this up into a mixed number to make our measuring easier. Okay, so think about that. How do we take an improper fraction and turn it into a mixed number? Here's a hint. Remember, we can use division. Think about it like this. What is 11 divided by 4? Or how many times can 4 go into 11? So 11 divided by 4 is going to get me, 4 can go in 2 whole times because 2 times 4 is 8, but it can't go in 3 whole times because 3 times 4 is 12. So I know it can go in 2 whole times or 2 full cups, and that will get me to 8, and then I'll have 9, 10, 11. So I'm going to have 3 left over. So we will call it 2 3/4. Okay, so when we're measuring our flour, and we're going to measure the flour into the little bowl. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure 2 3/4 cup of flour. And I try to get it as even as possible. And you would want to, if you're pouring it from the bag, just hold it over your bowl. So we're going to try to not make a giant mess, but baking it can be messy. And we'll put 1, there's our 2 whole cups. And now I need 3/4 cups. So there's a couple different ways to do this. A lot of times I would just still use my 1 cup and just fill it about 3/4 of the way full, which would be halfway in between a 1/2 cup and a 1/4 cup. Because we're going to do this the right way, I'm going to actually use my 1/4 cup and fill it 3 times. So you can see that it is actually 3/4 of a cup. Okay, so this would be like 75 cents out of $1. 1, 2, 3. So I've got 2 3/4 cups of flour. That's a lot easier to explain than 11/4. Okay, next we're going to be using our baking soda and our baking powder. Again, we don't want to get those confused. So the recipe calls for, or our mixed up recipe is calling for 8/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda. 8/8 of a teaspoon. So let's spend a minute and think about what is 8/8. I see that our recipe has 8/8, it has 9/9, it has 12/12, it has 6/6. What is it when a fraction, when the top and the bottom, or the numerator and the denominator, are the same? What is that equal to? So I hope that you were thinking one whole. If we have 9 out of 9 or 6 out of 6, we have 1 whole. So if we need 8/8 teaspoon of baking soda, we're going to put in 1 whole teaspoon of baking soda. So here are my measuring spoons, and your typical measuring spoons are going, the big one is going to be a tablespoon, and don't get that confused with a teaspoon, because if you put a tablespoon of baking soda in your cookies, they're not going to taste good. Okay, so we just want a teaspoon, which is the smaller one, like when you would mix up your tea with. Okay, if you don't have an actual set of measuring spoons, I'm going to show you what you would level off. This is a teaspoon. Let's just say you have just your regular like cereal spoon. So I'm going to put this in here first. And you can see that it fills up almost the whole just regular a teaspoon. So if you just have like a regular spoon, you can still use that, boys and girls. It doesn't have to be exact, okay? So we're going to use 1 teaspoon of baking soda, okay? Now next we have 25/50 teaspoon of baking powder. 25/50 doesn't seem like a very friendly fraction. Can we simplify that? What is the relationship of 25 to 50? Think about 25 cents and 50 cents. Okay, that's right, it's 1/2, okay? So for our baking powder, this guy, we're going to use 1/2 of a teaspoon. Okay, so again, if you have your measuring spoons, you can look on there and look for the one that says 1/2 TSP. TSP is the abbreviation for teaspoon. And I'm going to use, it's got this nice little edge to level it off with. But if you are using just a regular spoon, just put in about 1/2 as much of what you put in as baking soda. Okay, so we're going to put 1/2 of the baking powder in. Okay, now we have what's called all of our dry ingredients. Okay, they all kind of look the same. And we're just going to mix those together first. And I'm just going to use a little whisk to mix them up with, but you can use whatever spoon you've got. Okay, so there's our dry ingredients. And we're just going to set those to the side and get our mixing bowl ready. And we're going to put in the rest of the ingredients. All right. Now, in this bowl, we are putting in 6/6 of a cup of butter. Okay, so we just figured that out. 6/6 of a cup means 1 whole cup of butter. Okay, so you can use margarine, or you can even use shortening if you don't have enough butter. Sticks of butter are 1/2 of a cup. So if your recipe calls for 1 cup, you are going to need 2 sticks of butter to make a whole cup. Okay, a lot of times I may only have 1 stick of butter, so I'll use a half a cup with 1 stick, and then I'll use a half a cup of shortening and kind of cheat a little bit. The cookies still turn out great. Okay, so if you have margarine, or if you have shortening, or you have butter, that's fine. We're just going to use that, and it needs 1 cup of butter. Again, this needs to be nice and soft and gooey. You can see that mine is really gooey. We're going to plop that on in there, make sure there's no goodness left. Okay, that's a half of a cup. And the teaspoon marks for butter are on the label. So if you need something smaller for your recipe, you can just cut the butter. And again, this is a half. So if you cut the half in half, you can get a 1/4 cup as a half a stick of butter. Okay. Butter makes it better. All right, there we go. Got a little bit left on the wrapper, scrape that down. All right, there's my butter. Okay, so the recipe next, we need our sugar. Okay. We have some improper sugar here. Three halves? How do I do 3 halves of sugar? I could use my half cup and put it in there 3 times. But let's try to take that improper fraction and turn it back into a mixed number. What is 3 divided by 2? 3 divided by 2. How many times does 2 go into 3? 2 will go into 3 1 whole time. So we're going to need at least a cup of sugar. And then there's 1 left over. So we're going to keep the denominator of 2. So it would be 1 1/2. 1 1/2 cups of sugar. Okay? So I'm going to use my measuring cup here, my 1 cup. And again, if you're pouring it from the bag, just do it over the bowl. Because if you get a little extra sugar, that's not going to hurt anybody's feelings. So I've got 1 whole cup. And I'm going to use my half measurer to get some more sugar. And here's my half cup, 1 1/2 cups of sugar. Okay, so you're going to mix this up really well until it's really smooth. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to use a hand mixer. And if you have a hand mixer, then that's great. It's just not necessary. Okay, so we're just going to blend that up a little bit. I can use my spoon. Mix, 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 All right. Let's put that in there. Okay, so I'm going to bring this around here so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, it should look something like that, where all your butter and sugar is kind of all nice and mixed in together. Okay, nice and smooth. If you're doing this by hand, just get it so that your sugar is kind of all mixed in there. Okay, next we're going to add our egg, just 1 egg. Okay, and this can be tricky some of the first time that you do your eggs. My son Kellen loves to do the eggs, and I may have him join me for one of our recipes in the future. But what you're going to do is just take it on the edge of your bowl and give it a nice little whack. Okay, you're going to put your thumbs underneath and just gently pull those 2 sides apart, and hopefully you'll just get the 2 halves. If it crumbles in a bunch, then just pick the shells out. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Okay, and we're going to put that to the side. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and mix in our egg. And about the same time, you can go ahead and add your vanilla into. The vanilla in our recipe is calling for 12/12 of a teaspoon of vanilla. 12/12. That's right, 1 teaspoon. Just 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I'm going to use my measuring spoon again, just the 1 TSP. And we're gonna put in one, it just smells so good. I love vanilla. Okay. And again, you can mix this up by hand, but since I have my handy dandy mixer, I'm gonna use that. It doesn't have to be too much. Again, that should just look nice and creamy. Okay. Now, if you haven't turned on your oven yet, right now is a good time to preheat your oven. Okay, so we want the oven to get up to temperature before we put our cookies into it. So the oven temperature that we're using today is 350 degrees. That's a pretty common temperature to cook cookies at. So we're gonna go ahead, my oven is right here. I'm gonna turn it on to 350 and let that get ready while we're adding in the rest of the ingredients. All right, guys, I've got my oven preheating now, and we're gonna finish up and mix these ingredients together. Okay, so I've got what would be considered my wet ingredients, and I need to add in my dry ingredients. And I just like to add this a little bit at a time so that the flour doesn't poof all over the place. So just add a little bit and mix. And then we're gonna add a little bit more and mix that together. If you're using a hand mixer, you can still use this a little bit, but I find that it does kind of poof your flour, so I'm going to mix this up by hand. Okay, it's getting thicker and thicker. You may need, an adult to help you as the stirring gets harder. Okay, let's go ahead and add the rest of that in there. Okay, and this, you're going to see it gets really thick. This is nice, thick cookie dough. Mixy mix. Okay, see it's getting thicker and thicker there. And honestly, if you have gloves on, or maybe you don't care, and as long as your hands are nice and clean, you can even start just kind of mixing it up by hand too, as if you were, doing some Play-Doh. Okay, you can mix that up because we're going to end up rolling it out into little balls for our cookies anyway. So if you feel comfortable with doing that, you can go ahead and mix it up with your hands. Okay, I only feel comfortable doing that because I have gloves on. Okay, so we're going to finish mixing this up. Okay, that's looking about right. It should be about the consistency of Play-Doh at this point. All right. This is why you wanted that butter soft, so that it mixes together really well. That looks great. Okay, let me get some of this stuff out of the way. And let's go ahead and get our cookie sheet ready. See if I can put it where you can see it. Like I said, I like to put a piece of parchment paper on my cookie sheet. You can always put a piece of foil on there if you want. I just find it makes the cleaning of the cookie sheet so much easier. So I've got my little piece of parchment paper. Do not use wax paper. Okay, wax paper and parchment paper are not the same thing. Okay, they kind of look the same, but wax has wax in it, so it'll melt all over the place. So do not put wax paper on here. All right, so I'm just going to use the little spoon that I showed you with earlier. And we're going to just take a little bit of dough like this. And this is the fun part. You might even be able to get your brothers and sisters to help you. And we're just going to roll up our little cookie balls. Okay, maybe about like that. They're going to rise a lot. And this is supposed to make about 48 cookies. So I'm going to try to get about 24. Okay, we can make a little array there, like a 4x6 array or a 3x8. I don't think I can fit a 2x12 on here. I'm going to try to get 24 on this cookie sheet, and then I can get 24 on the next one. I'll be able to bake these in about 2 batches. I typically make my cookies a little bit bigger than the recipe says, so sometimes I won't get a full 48 out of the recipe. Okay, so we're just going to roll these up until you have a whole cookie sheet full of little dough balls. All right, so as you can see, I've got my little cookie balls all rolled up on there. I ended up not being able to fit 24. I actually fit 20 on the sheet, and that's okay. I mean, I may just need to make 3 sheets of them, or maybe we'll only end up with 40 cookies. So I kind of spaced them out, as you can see, because they're going to rise so much and spread out into cookie shape. You just want to make sure that they have a lot of space between them. Okay, so I think they're ready. I'm going to go ahead and put them in the oven. They're going to need to bake in the oven for about 8 minutes. Won't have to wait too long. Okay guys, it actually took my cookies about 10 minutes in my oven to bake. So maybe somewhere between, you know, that 9 and 11 or 8 and 10, depending on your oven. While my cookies were in the oven, I went ahead and rolled up the rest of the dough. I used a bigger cookie sheet this time, and I was able to get 30 more cookies. So it actually did turn out to be right around 50 cookies with this recipe. Okay, so I'm going to stick these in the oven. Let's look at the other ones. This time I'll set my oven for 10 minutes. All right, so as you can see, our cookies turned out a nice light brown. They smell really good. If they taste half as good as what they smell, then we'll be doing all right. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed baking with Mrs. Roth today and got a little fraction review. Tune in next week, and I will try to get the recipe out to your parents on Monday so we can make that shopping list. All right, bye guys.